Hey guys, tonight we begin with something sharp, disciplined, and steeped in blood. A time of swords, honor, and silent suffering. We're diving into what life was really like as a samurai during feudal Japan. Forget the noble warriors Hollywood sold you. The Zen masters meditating under cherry blossoms. The truth? You probably wouldn't last a single day. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations. You've just woken up in the year 1615, somewhere in the Tokugawa shogunate. The good news? You're alive. The bad news? Your entire existence is bound by a code so strict that a single misstep could end with your own sword in your belly. Your sleeping mat, a thin futon laid directly on tatami flooring, offers about as much cushioning as a rolled-up newspaper. There's no memory foam, no box spring, and definitely no Egyptian cotton sheets. Just woven straw beneath you and a wooden block serving as your pillow. Yes, a wooden block, because apparently comfort is for the weak, and your neck deserves to suffer for the honor of your lord. You blink awake as the first light filters through paper shoji screens. It's the Edo period version of an alarm clock, only quieter and somehow even less forgiving. Your home, if you're a lower-ranking samurai, is a modest wooden structure with sliding doors, minimal furniture, and a charming open-concept floor plan where privacy is a myth and every sound echoes like a drum in a temple. The smell? A subtle blend of tatami grass, incense from last night's offerings, and the faint mustiness of a building that's never truly dry. Scented candles haven't been invented, and even if they were, they'd be considered frivolous, wasteful, unbefitting of a warrior. You try to stretch, but immediately regret it because the air is freezing and your joints ache. You're 32 years old, which in samurai terms is roughly middle-aged. Your spine cracks like a bamboo stick snapping, and your knees sound like gravel being crushed under a cartwheel. Getting up is a gamble. The floor is either cold from the night air seeping through gaps in the walls or damp from condensation that forms on everything in this humid wooden box you call home. Either way, your bare feet are now part of the ecosystem. Oh, and privacy. What's that? Your entire family, possibly a servant, and maybe your lord's messenger who arrived last night and just never left, are all sleeping in adjacent rooms separated only by paper-thin walls. There's no bedroom, no curtains, no personal space, just communal everything. Welcome to morning in feudal Japan, where you're never truly alone because duty, honor, and societal expectations are always watching. And this is just how your day starts. It only gets more rigid from here. So you've managed to crawl out of your samurai sleeping arrangement of suffering. Congratulations. Now, nature calls. And it's not calling politely, it's demanding an audience. Here's the part where you start missing the modern bathroom. There's no toilet, no seat, no toilet paper, no flush. Not even a mildly resentful plunger in the corner. In feudal Japan, relieving yourself is an exercise in balance, dignity, and trying very hard not to think about what happens next. If you're a samurai of any rank, your bathroom is likely a wooden structure built over a pit, separated from the main house. It's called a kawaya, and it's basically a shed with a hole in the floor. You squat over it, trying to maintain your composure while insects buzz around and the smell rises like a vengeful spirit from the underworld. There's no ventilation to speak of, just a small window that lets in mosquitoes and judgmental birds. You hold your breath, do your business, and hope your balance is good because one slip and you're intimately acquainted with a week's worth of waste. Toilet paper? Never heard of it. Most samurai use wooden sticks called chugi, which are essentially thin, flat pieces of wood that you scrape across your posterior and then toss into the pit below. If you're feeling especially refined, you might use hemp rope or straw. sometimes nothing at all, which might explain why hand-to-hand combat was always conducted with swords at a respectful distance. And if you're in a castle, surely it's better, right? Well, sort of. You might have a slightly more elevated position, literally, with a wooden box that sits higher off the ground. Great idea. Except that the waste still drops into a collection pit that's emptied by servants, usually at night, and sold to farmers as fertilizer. That's right. Your shame becomes someone's crop nutrition. The contents of these pits were actually valuable. Night soil collectors would come around, scoop it up, and sell it to agricultural communities. So in a way, every samurai contributed to the rice that would eventually feed him. A beautiful circle of life, if you ignore the smell, the disease, and the absolute degradation of it all. One slip on a wet wooden plank, and you're face first into a week's worth of humanity's least elegant moments. And you still haven't washed your hands. But we'll get to that next. You survived the bathroom. You deserve a reward, right? Maybe a nice breakfast? Something warm, delicious, comforting? Sorry, this is feudal Japan. Nothing is indulgent here unless your lord permits it. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is a disciplined affair. There are no omelets, no butter, no coffee brewing in the corner, and certainly no avocado toast. You kneel on the tatami mat beside a low wooden table, your posture perfect because slouching is disrespectful, and you're served a simple meal in lacquered bowls. Welcome to your daily ration of rice, miso soup, and pickled vegetables. Rice is the foundation of every meal, steamed plain, and served in a small wooden or ceramic bowl. It's sticky, it's bland, and it's your primary source of energy. The miso soup is made from fermented soybean paste, seaweed, and maybe a piece of tofu if you're lucky. It's salty, earthy, and has been simmering since before dawn because your wife or a servant woke up at 4 a.m. to prepare it. On the side, pickled radish or cucumber, preserved in salt and rice bran, crunchy and sour enough to make your face pucker. What about drinks? You're not sipping orange juice or a matcha latte. You're drinking green tea, bitter and unsweetened, served in a small cup that you cradle with both hands because even the act of drinking is a ritual. It's meant to cleanse your palate, focus your mind, and remind you that pleasure is secondary to discipline. Kids drink it too. No one's happy about it, but at least it won't kill you, unlike some of the water sources nearby. Want some fish or meat? Dream on. That's for special occasions, festivals, or if your lord is feeling generous. Most samurai don't eat meat regularly. Buddhism, which heavily influenced Japanese culture, discouraged the consumption of four-legged animals. Fish was acceptable, but only on certain days. As for fresh fruit, only when it's in season, and even then, it's considered a luxury. A single persimmon might be more valuable than a day's wage for a farmer. And don't even think about variety. Spices, rare and expensive. Sugar, reserved for the elite. Salt is valuable enough to be carefully measured. Your seasoning comes from soy sauce, fermented fish, and whatever your cook can scavenge from the garden. So you chew your rice, sip your bitter tea, and try not to think about the fact that this exact meal will be repeated, with minor variations every single day for the rest of your life. Breakfast doesn't energize you. It sustains you. And now that you're properly underfed and ritually caffeinated, it's time to get dressed like your life depends on it. Because it absolutely does. So you've eaten your disciplined breakfast, and now it's time to get dressed. Not that it'll bring you comfort. Your wardrobe consists of layers, all of them designed more for function, formality, and intimidation than for anything resembling ease. There's no walk-in closet, no seasonal rotation. There's just a wooden chest in the corner containing your carefully folded garments, and the knowledge that how you wear them could mean the difference between respect and death. You start with the fundoshi, a traditional loincloth wrapped around your waist and between your legs. It's essentially a long strip of cotton or linen, and if you tie it wrong, you'll spend the entire day adjusting it in the least dignified way possible. Next comes the kosode, a simple robe with narrow sleeves made of cotton or hemp. If you're a lower-ranking samurai, it's plain, maybe dark blue or gray. If you're higher up, it might have a subtle family crest embroidered on it. This isn't fashion. This is identity. Over that, the hakama, wide pleated trousers that look elegant but are actually designed for mobility in combat. They're tied tightly at the waist and ankles, and if you've ever tried to run in a skirt, congratulations. You now understand the hakama experience. Then comes the kamishimo, a formal two-piece outfit with exaggerated shoulders, worn during official duties. It makes you look broader, more imposing, like a human triangle designed to remind everyone in the room that you are armed, trained, and not to be trifled with. And speaking of armed, let's talk about your swords. You wear two, always. The katana, your longsword, and the wakizashi, the shorter companion blade. Together they're called the daisho, and they're not just weapons. They're your soul. Losing them, even temporarily, is unthinkable. Disrespecting them is worse. They're polished, wrapped in silk, housed in lacquered scabbards, and positioned precisely at your left hip. Drawing them is a ritual. Using them is an art. And cleaning them after use is a sacred duty. But there's no washing machine, no dry cleaner, and absolutely no deodorant in sight. So your clothes are worn repeatedly, cleaned only occasionally, and they carry the scent of sweat, smoke from the fire, and a faint trace of the incense burned during morning prayers. If you're lucky, your garments are made of silk. If not, rough hemp that scratches your skin with every movement. Even if you wanted to wash them, it's not easy. You'd need to haul water from a well, heat it over a fire, scrub the fabric by hand with lye or ash, and hang it in the sun to dry, which only happens maybe 3 days a month because it's always either too humid or raining. And don't get me started on footwear. If you own any, they're zori or geta, wooden sandals with fabric straps that dig into the gap between your toes like tiny instruments of torture. Most of the time you're walking barefoot indoors and barely protected outdoors, through mud, through gravel, through whatever the road offers. All this means one thing. Your skin hates you. You itch constantly. Fleas, lice, and bedbugs live rent-free on your body. Everyone has them. Lords, monks, children, warriors. No one escapes. You'll be scratching your back with the hilt of your wakizashi while discussing strategy with your commander, and no one will even blink. Your skin is raw from rubbing. Your scalp a battlefield of bites. And if you develop a rash, too bad. There's no dermatologist, no ointment, no one to tell you it's probably scabies. You just keep on suffering, wrapped in duty and cotton, itching your way through another day of service. Now that you're dressed in layers of discomfort and armed with steel, it's time to head outside and begin the real work. The work that defines you, breaks you, and might just kill you. Now that you're fully dressed in ceremonial suffering and armed to the teeth, it's time to flash that morning discipline. Except you don't smile. Not really. Because in feudal Japan, excessive emotion is a weakness, and your teeth are a war zone. There's no toothbrush, no toothpaste, no mouthwash, no floss. The concept of oral hygiene exists, barely, but it's more ritual than science. Some samurai chew on the end of a willow twig to fray the fibers, creating a makeshift brush. Others use a mixture of salt and crushed seashells, rubbing it across their teeth with their fingers. But for the most part, your teeth are on their own, and they're losing the battle. By the time you hit your mid-30s, your smile looks like something carved from old wood. Cavities are everywhere. Gums are receding. And those dark spots? That's not staining. That's decay, setting in like rot in a forgotten shrine. The samurai diet doesn't help. While sugar isn't everywhere yet, fermented foods, pickled vegetables, and the constant consumption of rice create an acidic environment in your mouth that eats away at enamel like rust on a blade. If you're wealthy enough to afford sweets, small rice cakes sweetened with honey or imported sugar, congratulations. You get to rot your teeth faster than the peasants. If you're poor, you'll do it slowly, over time, with every bowl of salty miso and every sip of bitter tea. Toothaches? Get used to them. They're like the changing seasons, always there, always coming back. The kind of pain that makes you consider praying, drinking sake until you pass out, or just ripping the tooth out yourself with a pair of iron pincers. And that's not a joke. That was the actual treatment. Dentists didn't really exist, but there were wandering monks or barbers who doubled as surgeons. Yes, the same guy who shaves your head for a ceremony might also yank your molar out by candlelight, with zero anesthesia and a strong suggestion that you bite down on a piece of wood and think of your ancestors. Infected tooth? Hope you enjoy fevers, swelling, and the very real possibility of sepsis. Because without antibiotics, a simple dental infection can turn into a life-threatening condition. That's right. The same thing that sends modern people to a pharmacy with some amoxicillin could be your funeral in 1615. And there's no relief on the social front either. Your breath? Probably terrible. But so is everyone else's. Halitosis is universal. It's democratized suffering. In samurai culture, you're judged not by your smile, but by your composure, your swordsmanship, and your loyalty. Your teeth are just another part of your body slowly falling apart while you try to maintain the illusion of control. So you keep your mouth closed, your jaw tight, and your suffering silent. Because complaining about a toothache while your lord is discussing battle strategy is not just inappropriate, it's dishonorable. Now that your mouth is throbbing and your dignity intact, it's time to head outside. Because your real job, the one that will test your body, your mind, and your soul, is just getting started. Time to head to work. Except there's no office, no desk, no lunch break, and absolutely no chance of a promotion unless someone above you dies, dishonors themselves, or gets reassigned. Your job, if you're a samurai, is simple. Serve your lord, uphold the code, and don't die in a way that embarrasses your family. You are a bushi, a warrior. But in peacetime, that mostly means standing around looking intimidating, managing paperwork, or supervising peasants. Exciting, right? If you're a lower-ranking samurai, you might be assigned to guard duty. That means standing outside your lord's estate for hours, sometimes in the rain, sometimes in the blazing sun, with full armor on, and your hand resting on your katana. You don't move. You don't slouch. You don't scratch that bug bite on your neck. You stand there like a statue, a human warning sign that says, try something, and you'll be missing a limb. If you're slightly higher up, you might be a magistrate, a tax collector, or an administrator. Congratulations. Your job is now bureaucracy. You sit in a drafty room with ink, brushes, and stacks of rice paper, recording grain yields, settling disputes between farmers, or drafting formal letters in beautiful calligraphy that took you years to master. One smudge, one incorrectly drawn character, and you start over. There's no delete key, no spell check. Just you, your brush, and the knowledge that a poorly written report could offend your superior and cost you your position. Or worse. And if you're really lucky, you might be tasked with training. Younger samurai need to be taught swordsmanship, archery, horseback riding, strategy. You wake up before dawn, head to the dojo, and spend hours drilling kata, the precise, choreographed movements that turn combat into an art form. Every strike has a purpose. Every stance has meaning. You don't just swing a sword. You breathe with it, move with it, become it. It's exhausting, repetitive, and one mistake in front of your students could cost you respect, which in samurai society is worse than losing a finger. But here's the thing. Even in peacetime, you're always preparing for war. because war could come at any moment. A rival clan, a peasant uprising, an order from the shogun. You train every day. You maintain your weapons. You study strategy texts late into the night by candlelight, squinting at classical Chinese military writings that make your head ache. And if war does come, then your job becomes very simple. Kill or be killed. You'll be woken in the middle of the night, armored up, and marched for days to some battlefield you've never heard of, to fight for reasons that were decided by men in castles you'll never enter. Your weapons are sharp. Your training is rigorous. But war is chaos. Arrows fly from unseen bows. Spears thrust through gaps in your armor. Horses trample the wounded. Blood turns the ground into slippery mud. And in the middle of it all, you're expected to remain calm, focused, honorable. If you survive, you return home. If you don't, your family receives your swords and a commendation. Either way, your work is never done. Because in the life of a samurai, duty doesn't end. It simply shifts. From battlefield to courtroom, from dojo to cremation ground, you grip your sword, ignore the ache in your wrists, and keep going. Because in feudal Japan, your job isn't a career. It's your entire identity. And now that your body is sore from standing, writing, or swinging a blade for hours, let's talk about the weather. Because in Japan, temperature isn't just about seasons. It's about endurance. Let's start with winter. There's no central heating, no insulation, and no thermostat. Just wooden walls with gaps big enough to see through, paper screens that block light but not cold, and a small charcoal brazier in the center of the room that offers about as much warmth as a candle in a cathedral. You bundle up in every layer you own, but it's never enough. The cold seeps into your bones. Your breath fogs in the air even indoors. You wake up with frost on the inside of the shoji screens. Your fingers are so stiff in the morning that gripping your sword feels like holding ice. Frostbite isn't diagnosed. It's just called bad luck. You wrap your hands in cloth, tuck them into your sleeves, and keep moving because stopping means freezing. And firewood? Expensive. Gathering it from the forest requires permission, and taking the wrong branch from the wrong tree can get you fined, beaten, or worse. So you ration your heat like a miser, burning just enough to keep from dying and shivering through the rest. Now fast forward to summer. Sounds better, right? Wrong. In summer, Japan becomes a sweat-drenched, mosquito-infested hellscape. The humidity is so thick you can practically chew it. Your layered clothing clings to your skin, soaked through with perspiration by mid-morning. There's no fan, no air conditioning, and absolutely no relief. You sit in formal Seiza position, knees on tatami, back straight, while sweat rolls down your spine and pools at the base of your hakama. The mosquitoes are relentless. They swarm at dusk, drawn to your unwashed body and the smell of the rice fields nearby. You swat at them, but there are too many. Malaria isn't well understood. Neither is dengue fever. People just get sick, burn with fever, and either recover or don't. And the flies. Oh, the flies. Attracted to food, to waste, to anything organic. They land on your meal. They buzz around your face during meetings. You learn to eat quickly and without complaint. In the fields, the sun bakes you. No sunblock, no hat unless you fashioned one from straw like a peasant. Heat stroke is just called taking a bad turn. You pour water over your head when you can, but even the water is warm, pulled from wells that sit in the sun all day. And the worst part? You still have to train. Full armor, heavy swords, formal drills. Your lord doesn't care if it's 95 degrees. Discipline doesn't take a day off. And then there's the rainy season, tsuyu. Weeks of unrelenting rain that turns roads into rivers of mud, floods rice paddies, and makes everything damp. Your clothes never dry. Your tatami mats grow mold. Your wooden sandals rot. You trudge through it all. Your hakama soaked to the knees. Your katana wrapped in oiled cloth to prevent rust. and your mood as dark as the storm clouds overhead. So whether you're shivering in a drafty room, sweating through a summer council, or slogging through monsoon mud, the weather is always against you. There's no thermostat to adjust, no seasonal wardrobe that actually helps. Just you, the elements, and the expectation that you'll endure it all without complaint. Because in feudal Japan, comfort is a privilege. Suffering is the standard. Feeling thirsty? Need to freshen up? Want to splash a little water on your face to wake up from this honor-bound nightmare? Too bad. In feudal Japan, water isn't your friend. It's a gamble, and the odds are never in your favor. Let's start with drinking. The nearby stream looks clear, maybe even peaceful, with its gentle flow and smooth stones. But spoiler alert, it's not safe. Upstream, someone just emptied a chamber pot into it. Or a dead animal is decomposing somewhere in the current. Parasites, bacteria, and every medieval microbe known to man are waiting in every sip. That's why most samurai, like much of Japan, drink tea. Not because it's refined, though it is, but because boiling the water kills most of the things trying to kill you. Green tea, matcha, bancha, cheap tea made from lower-grade leaves and twigs, it's all safer than raw water. Sake is another option. Rice wine, mild in alcohol but strong in cultural significance. It's consumed during ceremonies, offerings to the gods, and moments of camaraderie. But even sake starts with water, and if that source is tainted, well, you're just drinking infected liquid with a bit of fermented rice for flavor. What about bathing? Surely water was used for cleaning, right? In theory, yes. In practice, complicated. Bathing in feudal Japan was actually a cultural ritual, especially among the samurai class. Public bathhouses, called sento, existed in larger towns and cities. They were communal, separated by gender, though not always, and they were places of social gathering as much as hygiene. You'd sit in a wooden tub filled with hot water, heated by a fire beneath, and soak alongside neighbors, fellow warriors, and strangers. It was relaxing, yes, but also a potential brew of skin infections, fungi, and whatever else was living in that reused, unchlorinated water. If you were wealthier, you might have access to a private bath at home or at your lord's estate. Same concept. Wooden tub, heated water. Except now you're alone, which is more hygienic, but also means you're responsible for hauling the water, heating it, filling the tub, and then disposing of it afterward. It's a full production. And in winter? Forget it. The effort required to heat enough water for a full bath means most people just do a quick wipe down with a wet cloth and call it a day. But here's the contradiction. Despite limited bathing, Japanese culture was obsessed with purity. Shinto rituals required cleansing. Misogi, the practice of purifying oneself under a waterfall or with cold water, was common among priests and devout samurai. It wasn't about soap or scrubbing. It was spiritual. You stood under icy water, endured the shock, and emerged purified in spirit, if not in body. Rainwater was collected in barrels, used for washing clothes or watering plants, but those barrels also became breeding grounds for mosquitoes, algae, and stagnant odors. Drinking from them was risky. Using them for anything other than laundry was a gamble. And wells, the most reliable source of water, were communal, shared by entire neighborhoods. You'd lower a wooden bucket on a rope, pull up what you hoped was clean water, and carry it home in ceramic jugs. One contaminated well could sicken an entire district. So whether it's going in your mouth, on your body, or into your tea ceremony, water in feudal Japan is less of a life source and more of a test. One wrong sip, one unboiled cup, and you're spending your final days sweating in a futon, clutching your stomach, and wondering which god you offended. Next time you turn on a tap and drink without thinking, raise that glass. Your ancestors didn't have that luxury. Hydration was a daily risk. Survival was never guaranteed. Now let's say you drank the water, or maybe you didn't. Maybe you just twisted your ankle during sword practice, or you woke up with a fever that won't break. Either way, you're sick. You need help. You need a doctor. Too bad you live in feudal Japan, where medicine is a mixture of herbal wisdom, religious ritual, and trial by suffering. Let's start with diagnosis. Everything wrong with you, whether it's a cough, a rash, a broken bone, or the early stages of plague, is caused by an imbalance. In traditional Chinese medicine, which heavily influenced Japan, your body is governed by ki, or life energy, flowing through meridians. Too much heat, too much cold, stagnant energy, blocked channels. It all leads to illness. The goal isn't to kill germs, a concept that won't be understood for centuries, but to restore balance. Got a fever? Too much yang energy. The treatment? Acupuncture, herbal teas, and lying still under a thin blanket while a monk chants sutras nearby. Feeling weak or fatigued? Lack of ki. The cure? Moxibustion, burning dried mugwort on specific points of your skin to stimulate energy flow. Yes, they burn you to heal you. It hurts. It blisters. But tradition says it works, so you endure it without complaint, because complaining would disrupt your ki even further. Now, if you break a bone or suffer a serious wound, you're in real trouble. There's no anesthesia unless you count passing out from pain or drinking enough sake to numb your senses, which isn't anesthesia. It's just drunk surgery. Battlefield injuries are treated by whoever's nearby. A fellow samurai, a servant, maybe a wandering monk with some medical training. They'll clean the wound with water if they remember, pack it with herbs, cloth, or even spider webs, which were believed to stop bleeding, and then wrap it tightly. Infection is common. Antibiotics don't exist. Germ theory is centuries away. They think disease comes from bad air, angry spirits, or moral failings. Got gangrene? Must be karma. A wound that won't heal? Clearly the gods are displeased. Hope you like praying, because that's your primary treatment plan. If the infection spreads, amputation might be the only option. And yes, that's done with a saw, a blade, and a lot of sake. For you, not the surgeon. Maybe for both. Herbal medicine is the backbone of treatment. There are skilled practitioners, some trained in Kanpo, traditional Japanese herbal medicine. They prescribe concoctions made from ginseng, ginger, licorice root, peony, and dozens of other plants. Some of it works. Willow bark contains salicylic acid, a precursor to aspirin. Ginger helps with nausea, but some of it is pure superstition. Grinding up cicada shells and mixing them with wine to cure convulsions? That's not medicine. That's hope in a cup. And if your condition worsens, you'll be treated with bloodletting, not with leeches like in medieval Europe, but with small cuts or cupping, where heated glass is placed on your skin to draw out bad blood. It doesn't work. It weakens you. But everyone believes it does, so you sit there, dizzy and pale, while a practitioner nods approvingly at the dark blood pooling in the glass. If you're truly desperate, you might visit a shrine or temple. Shinto and Buddhist practices blend health and spirituality. You'll make an offering, ring a bell, clap your hands, and pray to the kami or Buddha for healing. Priests might give you blessed water, protective amulets, or written prayers to burn and mix with tea. It's not medical, it's faith. But in a world where medicine is limited, faith is sometimes all you have. So yes, in feudal Japan, medicine is less about healing and more about enduring. If you survive, the gods are thanked. If you don't, it was your fate. The doctor, if you can call them that, takes no blame. The illness, the imbalance, the karma, it was always beyond control. You either recover through sheer will and luck, or you don't. And either way, suffering in silence is expected. Now that you've survived another day of potential medical disasters, let's talk about what shapes every moment of your existence. Religion. After a long day of duty, discipline, and barely surviving your own body, it's time to return to your modest home, stomach growling, ready for the one small comfort left in life: a warm meal. Except, bad news. Your meal might be trying to kill you. Let's begin with the basics. Food preservation is limited. There's no refrigerator, no freezer, just salt, smoke, fermentation, and hope. Your fish, if you're lucky enough to have any, has been dried, salted, or packed in rice bran for days. It's covered in a light dusting of mold, which you scrape off and pretend not to notice. It's been shared with flies, possibly a cat, and definitely handled by unwashed hands at some point in its journey from the sea to your table. Rice is still the foundation. But even rice isn't safe. In bad harvest years, desperate peasants, and even lower-ranking samurai bulk it up with millet, barley, or wild grains that are harder to digest and sometimes toxic if not prepared correctly. If the rice is old, stored improperly, or contaminated with moisture, it grows mold. Some of that mold is harmless. Some of it, like aflatoxin, can cause liver damage or death. You eat it anyway, because wasting food is dishonorable. Vegetables, only what's in season. Radishes, burdock root, taro, eggplant, boiled, pickled, or floating in miso soup. And pickles aren't just a side dish, they're survival. Fermented in salt and rice bran, they last for months and provide some of the only vitamins available in winter. But fermentation is unpredictable. One batch might be perfectly preserved. Another might be teeming with botulism. You won't know until someone gets sick. Miso soup, your daily staple, sits in a pot near the fire, sometimes for days. New ingredients are added on top of the old. It's a perpetual stew of seaweed, tofu, mushrooms, and whatever vegetables didn't rot yet. The longer it sits, the stronger it tastes. And yes, that includes bacteria. But boiling it each time, probably, keeps the worst at bay. Probably. Fish, when available, is eaten raw, salted, grilled, or dried. Sushi in its earliest form was fermented fish packed in rice for preservation. The rice was discarded. Only the fish was eaten. It smelled like death and tasted worse. But it didn't kill you immediately, so it was considered a delicacy. Fresh fish was a luxury. Most of what you ate had been dead for days, sometimes weeks. Meat is rare. Buddhism's influence means consuming four-legged animals is frowned upon, even taboo. Eating beef or pork could get you ostracized or accused of spiritual pollution. Chicken, duck, and wild game, like boar or deer, were occasionally eaten, but only by those willing to bend religious rules. And hunting? That's for lower classes or desperate times. A samurai hunting rabbits for dinner is a samurai who's fallen on hard times. Fruit is seasonal and scarce. Persimmons in the fall, plums in early summer. A single piece of fruit might be worth more than a day's wage for a servant. Sugar is almost non-existent. Sweetness comes from sweet rice, myrin, or rare honey. Anything sugary is reserved for the elite, monks, or special ceremonies. But food isn't just a health risk. It's a legal one. Hunting or fishing in the wrong territory, on land owned by a lord or protected by law, could get you executed. Poaching a deer? That's not just theft. That's defying the social order. You could be crucified, beheaded, or exiled. Your hunger could literally get you killed. So as you sit down to eat your reheated miso, your salt-caked fish, and your bowl of rice that may or may not contain trace amounts of fungus, remember that every bite is a gamble, but you eat anyway. Because in feudal Japan, food doesn't nourish. It tests you. And refusing it would be wasteful, disrespectful, and unworthy of a warrior. Now that you've risked your life with dinner, let's talk about what governs every breath you take. Religion. It's evening now. You've worked, suffered, and barely survived your own meal. You might think the day is winding down, but don't relax yet. Because the gods are watching. So are the Buddhas. And so is every ancestral spirit who died to give you the privilege of existing. In feudal Japan, religion isn't just part of life. It is life. Your morality, your schedule, your identity, everything is shaped by a blend of Shinto and Buddhism, so tightly woven you can't separate them. Shinto is the ancient belief system, the way of the kami, spirits that inhabit rivers, mountains, trees, even your kitchen. Everything has a spirit. Everything deserves respect. You clap your hands at a shrine, bow twice, and pray for protection, good harvest, or victory in battle. The kami don't promise salvation. They offer balance, favor, and sometimes punishment if you disrespect the natural order. Buddhism arrived from China and Korea, bringing with it the concepts of karma, reincarnation, and enlightenment. Life is suffering. Desire is the cause. The path to peace is detachment. For a samurai, this creates a beautiful contradiction. You're trained to kill, to serve, to desire honor and glory. But Buddhism tells you to let go of attachment, even to life itself. And somehow, you're expected to embody both, to live by the sword and die without clinging to existence. Every day is structured around religious observance. You wake before dawn and offer incense at the household altar, a small wooden shrine housing tablets inscribed with your ancestors' names. You light a candle, place a bowl of rice or tea as an offering, and bow. This isn't optional. Neglecting your ancestors invites misfortune, hauntings, and social shame. In samurai culture, your lineage is everything. Dishonoring the dead dishonors yourself. Temples and shrines are everywhere. If you live near a castle town, there might be a dozen within walking distance. Monks chant sutras at dawn. Bells ring to mark the hours. Festivals celebrate seasonal kami, agricultural cycles, or Buddha's birthday. You attend, not because you want to, but because absence is noticed. And being noticed for the wrong reasons can cost you your position, your reputation, or worse. Zen Buddhism particularly influences the samurai class. It teaches discipline, meditation, and the concept of mushin, no mind, a state of mental clarity achieved through rigorous practice. You sit in zazen meditation, cross-legged, spine straight, breathing controlled, while a monk walks behind you with a wooden stick. If your posture slips, if your mind wanders, whack. The stick comes down on your shoulder. It's not punishment. It's correction. And you're supposed to be grateful for it. Death is ever present in your spiritual life. Buddhism teaches that life is impermanent. Everything dies. Everyone dies. Clinging to life is futile. So you practice detachment. You meditate on death. You compose death poems, short verses meant to be recited or written just before you die. A final reflection on existence. Some samurai carry these poems with them into battle, already prepared for the moment their soul departs. But religion also offers control. Rituals, prayers, offerings. They create order in a chaotic world. When disease strikes, you pray. When war looms, you visit a shrine. When a child is born, you purify them with sacred water. Every major life event is wrapped in religious ceremony, and the priests, monks, and shrine maidens hold immense influence. They interpret omens, bless swords, and mediate between the human and divine realms. Yet for all this devotion, there's fear. Fear of vengeful spirits, onryo, ghosts of those who died in anger or injustice. Fear of pollution, kagare, spiritual impurity from death, blood, or childbirth. Samurai, who live by the sword, are constantly stained by death. They purify themselves through ritual bathing, salt, prayer, but the stain never fully lifts. So you bow to the kami, you chant the sutras, you honor the ancestors, not out of love, necessarily, but out of duty. Because in feudal Japan, the spiritual world is as rigid and unforgiving as the social one. Forget to pray, and you invite disaster. Question the order, and you risk everything. Your soul, like your sword, must be kept sharp, clean, and ready. Now that the gods have been appeased for another day, let's talk about another force that shapes your existence, often invisibly. Women. So far, you've endured filth, discipline, and spiritual obligation. But let's talk about the other half of feudal Japan. Women. If you thought being a samurai was hard, try doing it without any of the recognition, legal rights, or even the basic autonomy afforded to men. In the rigid world of the Tokugawa shogunate, being a woman is like playing life on the hardest difficulty setting with half the controls disabled. From birth, a girl's path is determined. Marry young, bear children, serve your husband and his family, and die quietly. That's it. That's the script. Education? Only if you're from a noble family, and even then, it's focused on arts that make you marriageable. Calligraphy, tea ceremony, poetry, flower arrangement. You're not taught strategy or governance. You're taught grace, obedience, and how to make yourself useful without being seen. Marriage happens early. It's not uncommon for girls to be betrothed at 12 and married by 15. Love has nothing to do with it. Marriage is a political tool, a contract between families to secure alliances, wealth, or social standing. Your feelings? Irrelevant. Your husband may be twice your age, cruel, unfaithful, or absent. Doesn't matter. Your duty is to obey, manage the household, and produce heirs, preferably male ones. Once married, your property. Legally, socially, spiritually. You move into your husband's family home, where you're now subordinate, not just to him, but to his mother, the real authority in the household. She dictates your schedule, critiques your work, and judges whether you're worthy of the family name. You wake before everyone else to prepare meals, clean, and manage servants, if you're wealthy enough to have them. If not, you do it all yourself. Childbirth is your primary function, and it's a death sentence for many. There's no prenatal care, no ultrasound, no epidural. Midwives do their best with herbal remedies, prayers, and experience. But complications mean death. Bleeding out, infection, obstructed labor, all common, all often fatal. Some women survive 10 pregnancies, many don't survive 2. And if the child dies, you're blamed. If you can't conceive, you're blamed. If you bear only daughters, you're blamed. Your husband can take concubines, lovers, or visit courtesans without consequence. You, adultery is punishable by death. For you, not him. A wife caught with another man could be executed, exiled, or returned to her family in disgrace, which is often worse than death. Meanwhile, your husband's infidelity is just accepted as part of life. Men have needs, women have duties, but not all women are invisible. Some, particularly in the earlier periods or in specific roles, wielded real influence. The Onabugeisha, female warriors, were trained in naginata, a bladed polearm, and tasked with defending estates when men were away at war. They fought, killed, and died with honor. But by the Edo period, even this martial tradition faded. Women were increasingly confined to domestic roles, their strength redirected toward endurance rather than combat. Widowhood offers a strange kind of freedom. Once your husband dies, especially if you have adult sons, you gain authority within the household. You're no longer someone's wife. You're the matriarch. You manage resources, arrange marriages, and command respect. But that respect is conditional. Step out of line, and you're labeled difficult, mad, or possessed. Education for women exists, but it's minimal and moral. You're taught the 3 obediences. Obey your father before marriage, your husband during marriage, and your sons in widowhood. You're also taught the importance of silence, modesty, and sacrifice. Speaking too much, laughing too loud, or showing too much intelligence makes you unmarriageable, scandalous, unfit. And yet, through all of this, women found ways to survive, resist, and even thrive. Some became poets, their words outlasting the swords of the men who dismissed them. Others became merchants, running businesses when their husbands proved incompetent. A few became spies, assassins, or political advisors, operating from the shadows where their influence couldn't be directly challenged. But for most, life was a cycle of service and silence. You raised children who would never fully value you. You managed homes that were never truly yours. You endured pain without complaint and died without ceremony. In feudal Japan, a woman's legacy was rarely her own. It was measured by the success of her sons, the obedience of her daughters, and the survival of her family name. So if you're a woman in this world, you learn quickly. Keep your head down. Master the small rebellions. Find power in the spaces men overlook. Because in a society built on hierarchy and honor, women are often the foundation, invisible, essential, and never credited. Now that we've seen how women endure this world, let's turn to something even darker: violence. So far, you've battled filth, starvation, disease, and spiritual dread. But just when you think your day can't get worse, here comes violence. Swift, brutal, and woven into the very fabric of samurai society. Let's be clear, feudal Japan is not peaceful. The romantic image of the serene warrior meditating under cherry blossoms is propaganda. The reality is blood, betrayal, and a legal system that treats human life as negotiable. Violence is everywhere, in the home, in the streets, on the battlefield, in the courts, and sometimes even in religious disputes. The samurai class has a legal monopolonium on violence. You are allowed, even expected, to use lethal force to defend your honor, your lord, or the social order, and that privilege is terrifying in its scope. Let's start with Kirisut Gomen, literally, authorization to cut and leave. It's a samurai's legal right to kill a commoner on the spot if they perceive disrespect. A peasant doesn't bow low enough? You can cut them down. A merchant argues over a price? Legally, you can end their life. There's no trial, no investigation. As long as you can justify it as a defense of honor, the death is sanctioned. Of course, you're supposed to report it afterward, and excessive use might raise questions. But in practice, the word of a samurai outweighs a dozen peasant witnesses. This creates a culture of fear. Commoners live in constant anxiety around the samurai class. Eye contact can be dangerous. Speaking too loudly, walking too close, even existing in the wrong place at the wrong time can get you killed. And for the samurai, this power is intoxicating and isolating. You're respected, yes, but also feared. And that fear breeds resentment, which breeds rebellion, which breeds more violence. Duels are common. If another samurai insults you, questions your skill, or dishonors your family, you challenge them, not with words, with steel. These aren't formal affairs with rules and referees. They're sudden, decisive, and often fatal. Two samurai meet at dawn, swords drawn, and one of them doesn't go home. Sometimes it's over a woman. Sometimes it's over a perceived slight. Sometimes it's just because someone was in a bad mood and needed an outlet. Seppuku, ritual suicide, is another form of violence, self-inflicted, and considered the ultimate act of honor. If you fail your lord, lose a battle, or are accused of a crime, you may be ordered to commit seppuku, or you may choose it yourself to avoid capture or disgrace. The process is precise. You dress in white, the color of death. You write a death poem. You kneel in formal position. Then, with a short blade, you cut your own abdomen open, left to right, sometimes upward. It's agonizing. You're not supposed to scream. A trusted friend, your kaishakunin, stands behind you with a sword. Once you've made the cut, they decapitate you to end your suffering. It's mercy, efficiency, and horror, all in one motion. But seppuku isn't always voluntary. It's often a polite execution. Your lord tells you to take responsibility, and you know what that means. You go home, prepare yourself, and die by your own hand to preserve your family's honor. Refuse, and you'll be executed anyway, but without dignity. Your family will be shamed, your name erased. So you do it. You cut, you bleed, and you die with composure. Warfare is its own category of violence. When clans go to war, it's total. Armies march for weeks, burning villages, seizing supplies, and killing anyone who resists. Battles are chaotic. Arrows darken the sky. Cavalry charges crush infantry. Spears pierce armor. Swords clash in close combat, and the ground turns to mud mixed with blood and entrails. There's no Geneva Convention, no rules of engagement. Prisoners might be executed, enslaved, or ransomed. Women and children in occupied territories are not spared. And if you're captured, torture is likely, not for information necessarily, but as punishment or public spectacle. Crucifixion, boiling, slow dismemberment, all documented methods. Executions are public events. Crowds gather. Children watch. It's meant to be educational, a reminder of what happens when you defy authority. Even in peacetime, violence simmers beneath the surface. Vendettas between families can last generations. A slight from 50 years ago might result in an assassination today. Ronin, masterless samurai, wander the countryside, some seeking new lords, others turning to banditry. They're desperate, skilled, and dangerous. Encountering one on a dark road is a coin flip between conversation and combat. Domestic violence is normalized. A husband can beat his wife without legal consequence. A father can discipline his children with whatever force he deems necessary. Servants, peasants, anyone lower in the hierarchy can be struck, whipped, or worse, and there's no recourse. Complaining makes it worse. But here's the cruelest part. All this violence is considered honorable. It's not chaos. It's order. The samurai enforces hierarchy with his blade. The lord maintains control through fear. The system functions because everyone knows their place, and stepping out of line means death. Violence isn't a breakdown of society in feudal Japan. It is society. The sword is law. The warrior is judge, jury, and executioner. And everyone, from the highest noble to the lowest peasant, lives with the knowledge that life is fragile, justice is brutal, and your next breath is never guaranteed. Now that we've walked through a world soaked in blood and bound by steel, let's talk about the one certainty that awaits everyone: death. At this point, you've made it through the dirt, the discipline, the decay, and the constant threat of sudden violence. But now comes the final chapter of every samurai's life, and most lives in feudal Japan: an early, often unceremonious death. If you're alive past 40, you're an anomaly. People refer to you as venerable, elder, as if you've unlocked some forbidden secret. In reality, you've just been lucky. Very lucky. Let's break it down. The average life expectancy hovers around 30 to 40 years, though that number is heavily skewed by infant mortality. Nearly 1 in 3 children dies before age 5. Disease, malnutrition, accidents, or simply the harshness of early life wipes them out before they can walk properly. If you survive childhood, you enter adulthood already worn. Hard labor starts young. By 12, you're training with weapons or working the fields. By 25, your body feels 50. For samurai, the dangers are constant and varied. Training accidents, a sparring partner strikes too hard, a horse throws you, a blade slips during practice. Infections from minor wounds, a cut on your hand festers, turns black, and within a week, you're feverish and dying. No antibiotics, no surgical intervention, just prayers, herbs, and hope. Battle, of course, is the most obvious killer. Even in peacetime, skirmishes, duels, and assassinations claim lives. And in war, survival is luck. A stray arrow, a spear thrust, a cavalry charge. Death comes fast and without warning. Women face their own deadly gauntlet. Childbirth is one of the leading causes of death for women in feudal Japan. There's no prenatal care, no cesarean section, no blood transfusions. Complications like hemorrhage, infection, or obstructed labor mean death. Some women survive multiple births. Many don't survive their first. And even if they do, the physical toll is immense. Repeated pregnancies, malnutrition, and lack of medical knowledge leave them weakened, aged beyond their years. For men, the dangers are different, but just as relentless. Farming accidents, a fall from a roof while repairing thatch, a leg crushed by a cart, an ox that panics and tramples you. Infections from any of these can turn fatal within days. Occupational hazards, blacksmiths breathe in toxic fumes. Miners collapse from lung disease. Fishermen drown in sudden storms. Even walking to the market can be risky. Bandits, wild animals, or simply crossing a river during the rainy season, all potential death sentences. Disease is the silent reaper. Smallpox, measles, dysentery, tuberculosis, all common. Epidemics sweep through villages, leaving mass graves in their wake. There are no vaccines, no quarantine protocols. People die in clusters, families wiped out in days. And the responses? Prayer, isolation, and burning the bodies quickly to appease the spirits and prevent further spread. Famine is another killer. A bad harvest, a flood, a drought. Any of these can lead to mass starvation. The Tokugawa period saw several major famines. People ate bark, roots, and clay mixed with what little grain remained. Children died first, then the elderly, then anyone without reserves. Samurai, while better off than peasants, were not immune. Lower-ranking warriors, those without land or stipends, sometimes starved alongside commoners. And then there's seppuku, ritual suicide, culturally expected in certain situations. Fail your lord, lose a battle, get accused of a crime, and you're expected to end your own life. It's not just execution. It's a way to preserve honor, to control your death rather than let it be imposed. But it's still death. Slow, painful, deliberate. You cut your own abdomen, your entrails spill, and a comrade beheads you to end the suffering. It's considered noble, but it's also tragic. Lives ended not by disease or battle, but by the weight of social expectation. Funerals, if you get one, are Buddhist affairs. Your body is washed, dressed in white, and placed in a wooden coffin. Monks chant sutras to guide your spirit to the afterlife. Incense burns. Family members offer prayers. Then, cremation. Your body is burned on a pyre, reduced to ash and bone fragments. These are placed in an urn and buried or kept at a family altar. There's no embalming, no elaborate tomb unless you're nobility. Just fire, ash, and memory. But many don't get even that. Soldiers who die far from home are buried in mass graves or left where they fall. Peasants who die during famine are sometimes piled and burned together. No ceremony, no names. Ronin, masterless samurai, might die alone on the roadside, their bodies scavenged by animals. Forgotten. Death in feudal Japan isn't romanticized in life. It's expected. It's omnipresent. Children grow up seeing corpses. Funerals are frequent. Graveyards are full. And yet, there's a strange acceptance. Buddhism teaches impermanence. Everything dies. Everyone dies. Clinging to life is suffering. So you live with purpose, serve with loyalty, and when death comes, you face it with composure. Or at least you try. Some samurai prepare for death their whole lives. They write death poems as young men, updating them as they age. They meditate on mortality, visualizing their own end to remove fear. And when the moment comes, whether on a battlefield, in a sickbed, or kneeling in ritual suicide, they aim to die well. Not peacefully, necessarily, but with dignity, with control. But here's the reality. Most deaths aren't dignified. They're messy, painful, and lonely. You don't get to choose. You don't get a final poetic moment. You just stop, And if you're lucky, someone remembers your name long enough to carve it on a memorial tablet. If not, you fade into the soil. Another life lived hard and ended early, in a world that never promised you anything but duty, suffering, and the sharp edge of existence. Now let's talk about what's left behind. Legacy. So how's your day been? You've woken up in a frozen wooden box, squatted over a pit of nightmares, choked down fermented uncertainty, dressed in itchy misery, worked until your spine bent, dodged disease, prayed to appease invisible forces, and lived under the constant shadow of death. Welcome to a single day in feudal Japan. Still romanticizing the way of the samurai? Think again. That idealized version of Japan, serene gardens, wise masters, honorable duels under moonlight, it's a fantasy, a story polished by centuries of myth-making, propaganda, and selective memory. In truth, the samurai world was brutal, hierarchical, and deeply unforgiving. Honor wasn't a virtue. It was a cage. A set of rules so rigid that stepping outside them, even slightly, could mean death. Hierarchy was everything. If you were born into a samurai family, you served. If you were born a farmer, you farmed. If you were born an outcast, you stayed one. There was no social mobility, no bootstraps to pull yourself up by. Your blood determined your life, and questioning that order was heresy. The Tokugawa shogunate enforced this structure with ruthless efficiency. Peace, yes, but peace maintained through surveillance, control, and the ever-present threat of violence. Even within the samurai class, inequality reigned. A high-ranking retainer lived in relative comfort. A low-ranking foot soldier scraped by on a rice stipend that barely fed his family. And a ronin, a masterless samurai, was a ghost. No lord, no purpose, often no future. Some became bodyguards or teachers. Others turned to crime. Many simply faded away, forgotten. The simpler times weren't simple. They were relentless. Everything took longer. Everything hurt more. A toothache could kill you. A cut could cost you a limb. Childbirth was a dice roll with death. And every day, you woke up knowing that your life wasn't your own. It belonged to your lord, your family, your social position. You were a cog in a machine, and the machine didn't care if you were tired, sick, or broken. It just kept turning. But here's the thing. Despite all of this, despite the suffering, the rigidity, the violence, people still found moments of beauty. They wrote poetry that still resonates today. They crafted swords so perfect they're considered art. They built gardens that reflected the universe in a handful of stones. They developed tea ceremonies that turned drinking into meditation. They loved, laughed, created, and resisted in small, quiet ways. This wasn't because life was easy. It was because humans are stubborn like that. Even in the darkest, most oppressive systems, they carve out space for meaning. A samurai might spend his day enforcing brutal laws, then spend his evening writing haiku about the moon's reflection on water. A woman trapped in a loveless marriage might find solace in flower arrangement, creating something beautiful in a world that denied her agency. A farmer, ground down by taxes and labor, might still sing while planting rice, finding rhythm in repetition. The legacy of the samurai is complicated. On one hand, they're symbols of discipline, loyalty, and martial skill. Bushido, the way of the warrior, is still studied, romanticized, and commodified around the world. On the other hand, they were enforcers of a brutal class system. They killed with legal impunity. They upheld a social order that crushed millions under its weight. Both things are true. History isn't clean. It's messy, contradictory, and written by those with the power to hold the pen. So tonight, when you settle into your bed, with its soft mattress, climate control, and indoor plumbing, take a moment, not just to feel grateful, though you should, but to remember. Remember the people who lived in that world, the samurai who died young, their honor intact, but their bodies broken, the women who endured, invisible, essential, and unremembered. The children who didn't survive their first winter. The farmers who fed an empire and starved doing it. Their world was sharp. It cut anyone who touched it. But they lived it anyway. They found joy in cherry blossoms knowing they'd fall in days. They wrote about impermanence because they felt it in their bones. And they created a culture so rich, so layered, that we're still trying to understand it centuries later. The samurai didn't just fight, they survived. And in surviving, they left behind something that still echoes, not just in history books or museums, but in the idea that discipline, even in suffering, can create meaning. That beauty can exist alongside brutality, and that a life bound by duty can still be a life fully lived, even if it ends too soon. So the next time someone talks about honor, about the way of the warrior, about the elegance of feudal Japan, remember the rest: the blood, the hunger, the cold, the fear. Remember that honor often meant suffering in silence, that discipline was enforced with violence, and that the beauty we admire today was created by people who lived in a world that gave them very little and took almost everything. They didn't have a choice, but you do. You can learn from their resilience without romanticizing their suffering. You can appreciate their art without ignoring their pain. And you can honor their memory by understanding the full truth, not the myth, not the legend, but the reality of what it meant to wake up in feudal Japan, strap on 2 swords, and face another day in a world that was elegant, disciplined, and absolutely unforgiving. Long before the swords were sheathed, before the Tokugawa peace, before the rigid structure we've explored tonight, the samurai were something else entirely. They were warriors, yes, but also survivors of centuries of civil war, political intrigue, and constant transformation. To understand the samurai of the Edo period, you have to understand where they came from. And that story is written in blood, ambition, and the slow, painful birth of a nation. The samurai class emerged in the Heian period around the 9th century, not as noble warriors, but as hired muscle. Provincial lords needed protection from bandits, rival clans, and the chaos that plagued the countryside, while the imperial court in Kyoto concerned itself with poetry and politics. These early samurai were rough, pragmatic, and loyal to whoever paid them. They weren't philosophers. They were survivors. By the 12th century, 2 clans rose to dominance, the Taira and the Minamoto. Their rivalry exploded into the Genpei War, a brutal conflict that ended with the Minamoto victory and the establishment of the first shogunate. Minamoto no Yoritomo became the first shogun, the military dictator who ruled in the emperor's name. The emperor remained, a symbolic figurehead in Kyoto, while real power shifted to the warrior class. This wasn't a peaceful transition. It was a coup, legitimized over time, accepted because the alternative was chaos. For the next 4 centuries, Japan was a war zone. The Kamakura shogunate fell. The Ashikaga shogunate rose and crumbled. The Sengoku period, the age of warring states, turned the country into a patchwork of feuding domains. Every lord wanted to be shogun. Every samurai fought for land, for survival, for glory. Castles were built and besieged. Alliances formed and shattered. Entire bloodlines were wiped out overnight. This was the crucible that forged the samurai ethos. Loyalty became currency because betrayal was everywhere. Honor became a code because without it, there was only chaos. And death became so common that it had to be ritualized, made meaningful, or it would drive everyone mad. The samurai didn't choose their path. It was carved out by necessity, violence, and the need to create order from endless war. Then came the unifiers. Oda Nobunaga, ruthless and brilliant, began the process of consolidating power. He burned temples, crushed rebellions, and used firearms, a new technology from Europe to devastating effect. He didn't care about tradition. He cared about winning, and he almost succeeded. Then he was betrayed, forced to commit seppuku by one of his own generals. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, a peasant who rose to become Nobunaga's successor, continued the work. He unified most of Japan, invaded Korea twice, and died leaving a young heir and a fragile peace. And finally, Tokugawa Ieyasu, patient and calculating, won the decisive battle of Sekigahara in 1600. He became shogun in 1603 and established a dynasty that would last over 250 years. The Tokugawa shogunate didn't just rule, it froze Japan in place. The class system was codified. Samurai were no longer wandering warriors. They became bureaucrats, administrators, swordsmen without wars to fight. The country was closed to most foreign influence. Christianity was banned. Trade was restricted. And the samurai, once defined by battle, had to find new meaning in a world that no longer needed them to fight. This is the world you woke up in at the beginning of this journey. A world shaped by centuries of war, now locked in an enforced peace. The samurai of the Edo period carried the legacy of their ancestors, warriors who had fought, killed, and died to build a nation. But they themselves lived in the shadow of that history, bound by its codes, haunted by its ghosts, and struggling to find purpose in a peace they didn't fully trust. Their legacy is still debated. Were they noble warriors or brutal enforcers? Artists or killers? Philosophers or fanatics? The answer is all of it. They were products of their time, shaped by violence and beauty, discipline and cruelty. And when the Tokugawa shogunate finally fell in the 19th century, when Japan opened to the world and modernized, the samurai class was abolished. Their swords were taken. Their stipends ended. Many became soldiers in the new army. Others became teachers, politicians, or faded into obscurity. But the image remained. The idea of the samurai, the loyal warrior, the disciplined master, the man who faces death without fear, it became myth, and myths are powerful. They inspire, they deceive, they endure. Today, the samurai are symbols of Japan, of a lost world, of ideals we project onto the past because the present feels too complicated. But the truth is more interesting than the myth. The samurai were human, flawed, contradictory, capable of great beauty and terrible violence. They lived in a world that demanded everything from them and gave little in return. They endured. They adapted. And when their time ended, they left behind a legacy that still cuts deep. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real, sharp, painful, and impossibly human. So as we close this journey, remember them not as legends, but as people. People who woke up in cold rooms, tied on swords they hoped not to use, and faced each day with discipline forged in fire. They didn't have the luxury of choice, but they made meaning anyway. And maybe in that, there's something worth carrying forward. Not the violence, not the hierarchy, but the resilience, the ability to find beauty in suffering, purpose in discipline, and dignity in the face of an unforgiving world. The samurai are gone, but the questions they lived with remain. What does it mean to serve? What does honor cost? And how do we face death knowing life is so brief and so brutal? They didn't have all the answers, neither do we. But they faced the questions with steel in hand and ink on paper. And that, perhaps, is legacy enough.